welcome to SVG-TV's news for Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. I'm Triska Campbell with the details. The National Fisherfolks organization, comprising all primary fishing cooperatives across St. Vincent and the Grenadines, has voiced strong opposition to the construction of a retail outlet by Rainforest Seafoods in its compound in Caliacqua. Speaking in Parliament on Monday, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, Sabota Caesar, revealed that the new facility will offer a range of seafood products, including snapper, lobster, tuna, and conch, sourced locally. He emphasized that the initiative is intended to benefit hundreds of local fishers by providing a consistent and reliable market for their catch. In addition to locally sourced seafood, the outlet is expected to feature import products and include a farmers market component. However, in a statement issued today, President of the National Fisherfolks organization, Winsbert Harry, said the country's fisherfolk are united in their opposition to the project. He confirmed that the organization has submitted a formal petition to the Physical Planning Unit objecting to the construction of the facility.
As the president and a fisherman, I would like to say we see this new outlet as a growing concern, and that will create havoc and that will destroy our fish stock and our fish resources in St. Vincent, giving Rainforest this new outlet. One, Rainforest come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to export $20 million worth of fish. We the fishers was told also that Rainforest will not be competing with local fishers and local vendor. They will also not be able to fish in our waters. We was told that Rainforest will be exporting all seafood and sea product. But when fishers approach Rainforest for do business, the price that they was offering to us, the fisherfolks, was a peppercorn change. Fishers decided not to support or sell any of their fish product to Rainforest because of price. My brothers and sisters and fishers, fisherfolks, we are not supporting this move. We see this as a direct check to the local fish vendors who operate from Kingston and the local vendors who sell and buy fish at 100 yards away from the Caliacqua fish market.
Minister Caesar, addressing the concerns in Parliament, stated that while Rainforest Seafoods may import fish, such imports will be subject to applicable duties and only allowed when those specific types of fish are not available locally. He also rejected claims that the retail outlet would compete with the existing Caliacqua fish market, saying the facility is meant to complement, not to replace, the current services. Still, the National Fisherfolks organization remains unconvinced, and President Harry has issued a call for all fisherfolk, fishers, and other stakeholders in the fishing industry to unite in protest against what he described as a potentially harmful development.
Because we know there is nothing else we can do, because we had been bullying and getting bullied many times, us the fishers. No matter how we the fisher folks meet and sit with these persons, it seems like it's just a talk shop. As a fisherman, I would like to encourage fishers. This is going to be a disaster towards the fishing industry. The reason why I'm saying disaster towards the fishing industry, this year the Caribbean Week of Agriculture was hosted in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where they was looking to reduce the food import bill by 25 by 2030. And what we are seeing before the year is out, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has made a natural move to import fish from a South American country that are now selling to our local vendors and our fish market. We was told that we have a shortage of fish at St. Vincent. Fishermen are not able to bring in fish at a high standard and a high quality, and even not to support the local market, and hence that we need to import fish from a South American country. I must say, giving Rainforest this opportunity, we'll now see Rainforest looking to move and up their game by even bringing their boats to fish in our waters. I mean, encouraging fishers. If the fishers in St. Vincent are not selling rainforest to the local price, where rainforests going to get their fish from to sell at that market. St. Vincent and the Grenadines have one of the most sustainable fisheries, most sustainable fishers. We normally fish on the morning and return on the evening. We do not spend many times at sea and days. The fleet expansion program is not working. Since it been in existence, not even 10% of Fisherfolks benefit from that program to upgrade and to develop their capacity within the fisheries sector.
In response to broader concerns about negative impacts on local livelihoods, Minister Caesar reaffirmed the government's commitment to protecting the interests of fishers. He clarified that no duty-free concessions have been granted to the retail arm of the Rainforest Seafoods operations. Furthermore, he stated that the government remains open to supporting Vincentians who wish to establish similar seafood retail ventures and would consider providing concessions to those initiatives. Despite these reassurances, the National Fisherfolk Organization maintains its stance and continues to advocate against the establishment of the Rainforest Seafoods retail outlet in Kaliakwa.
There is no plan in place to develop fishing cooperative to develop the fishing landing site around St. Vincent and the Grenadines that can go in the capacity that they can develop and buy from our local fishers. Foreign investors have been given the duties and grants that is not trickling down to the local fisherfolks. For instance, look at the new recently increase of costs that the agriculture input warehouse has been put on the local fishermen. Rainforest seafood going to destroy our fishing industry because we was told that they're going to export, and what we are seeing now is a different ball game. This is time for us, the fisherfolks, to be real and be together and stand united against this new development by saying that fisherfolks will be benefiting from this move when fisherfolks are not benefiting from the previous move.
Lafayette Bancorp Limited, a Vincentian majority financial service holding company headquartered in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, today announced that it now is a shareholder in the St. Vincent Cooperative Bank Limited SVGTV and has entered into agreements with multiple shareholders to acquire a controlling stake in the institution. In a news release, the company described the move as a key milestone in its broader commitment to strengthening and modernizing the financial sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and across the Eastern Caribbean. The announcement comes as the SVCB celebrates its 80th anniversary, an occasion Lafayette Bancorp says underscores the importance of building on the bank's strong legacy of financial inclusion. The company said this investment honors and builds upon the vision of the bank's founders, reinforcing its legacy while preparing it for the next generation. The proposed acquisition is currently under review by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the ECCB, in accordance with the Banking Act. Lafayette Bancorp emphasized that the transaction aligns with its mission to drive economic growth, foster financial inclusion, and promote digital innovation throughout the region. Fully committed to a transparent and collaborative regulatory process, the company stated that pending regulatory approval, its goal is to transform SVCB into a forward-looking, technologically driven financial institution, one that expands access to banking services, empowers entrepreneurs, and enhances regional competitiveness. Lafayette Bancorp concluded by affirming its respect for the bank's proud legacy and its intention to usher in a bold new chapter for banking in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Rebuilding in the Grenadines of the EC $136.4 million approved by Parliament for the supplementary budget following Hurricane Beryl, which struck St. Vincent and the Grenadines in July 2024. A total of EC $88.3 million has been spent to date. This represents an implementation rate of approximately 65%. This information was revealed by Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Information Technology Camilla Gonsalves in Parliament in response to a question posed by opposition MP Dwight Fitzbramble. Bramble had inquired about how much of the allocated funds had been used and what factors may have contributed to the underutilization of the budget.
The implementation rate on the recurrent side was stronger at about 80%. There were greater challenges on the capital side for the following reasons. Honorable members will recall, and it's important as we discuss this, that we came to this Parliament with a supplementary estimate within 2 weeks of the passage of Hurricane Beryl. And at that point, we were operating on a number of assumptions, a number of estimates, and about both the work required and the resources that we would receive from third parties along the way. So, to answer the question asked by the Honourable Member, I'm going to summarize, Honourable Member, and then I'll give you some specific examples. Some elements of the supplementary budget represented overestimations of what was required to get the work done. So we ended up spending less than we needed to spend to get some of the work done. Some elements were delayed by contractor availability or logistical challenges in the wake of the hurricane. Some elements that we budgeted to pay through government funds ended up being covered by bilateral grants, NGO support, or third-party assistance. And some funds from pledges or development partners were not forthcoming in as timely a manner as we desired, causing delays in the commencement of some of the projects.
Minister Gonsalves outlined several reasons for the lower tax expected implementation rates. He noted that while $2.5 million was budgeted for land acquisition in the Grenadines as part of the rehabilitation response, this expenditure did not materialize during the initial recovery phase. He explained that no significant land purchases were required early and that a primary focus has been on repairing and rehabilitating damaged properties, particularly those categorized as Level 1 and Level 2. He also pointed to a line item of $1.9 million that has been budgeted for aggregates material such as gravel and crushed stone, which was expected to be in short supply post-hurricane. However, during the early reconstruction period, there was no shortage of aggregates in the Grenadines, and therefore the funds allocated for that purpose were not immediately utilized.
So that is already $4.4 million that we did not have to spend, that we had anticipated spending. In the Ministry of Housing, the home reconstruction phase 3, which had a $10 million budget from to be funded by Taiwan, $2.7 million of that was spent during the 6-month period. As the entity contracted to do the work, the HLDC, took a little more time than was originally anticipated to get going due to the magnitude of the assessments that had to be undertaken. In the Ministry of Urban Development, we had budgeted $3.5 million for the construction of temporary jetties in the Grenadines. This was ultimately reallocated and reassigned to the Port Authority, and the Port Authority then entered into partnerships with other third parties like the Gumbo Limbo Group to complete a lot of these works through the auspices of the Port Authority. So that was again money that was budgeted that didn't need to be spent by the central government because it was dealt with otherwise. In the Ministry of National Mobilization, we had budgeted $4 million for the provision of relief supplies. These funds were allocated to provide generators and tarpaulins to people affected. However, NGOs, grants and donations covered the majority of the tarpaulins, generators and the like that were necessary. In the Ministry of Tourism, we budgeted $1.5 million for the repair of tourism sites, improvement of tourism sites affected by Beryl. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, Bragsa, which is the entity that would have to do those evaluations, was so swamped with the cleanup in the Grenadines and the repair that the assessments necessary to unlock the resources to do those improvements didn't take place until much later in the year. So we rolled that money into the 2025 budget, and those things will be completed this year in 2025.
The Finance Minister further told Parliament that it is safe to say that the government has spent more than $120 million in total on Hurricane Beryl relief efforts since July 1st, 2024. This figure includes not only government expenditure but also contributions from third-party entities and non-governmental organizations, which provided an estimated $45 million in cash and in-kind support. This brings the total hurricane-related spending to approximately $165 million. Minister Gonsalves described the financial response as an unprecedented amount of expenditure in the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, underscoring the scale of the damage caused by the Category 4 storm, which brought widespread destruction to infrastructures, homes, and livelihoods across the islands.
We're less than 1 year removed from the passage of Hurricane Beryl, and we're already approaching $200 million in expenditure. And much of the housing expenditure, particularly with the prefab housing and the like, is yet to come. And I believe the Honourable Member, we've seen on the news that phase of the housing reconstruction is about to begin. I want to thank, Madam Speaker, most sincerely, all contractors, all government officials who have had to shepherd this through the various steps, the hard-working people in the Treasury, in the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Grenadine Affairs, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Transport and Works, who have been doing yeoman service, Madam Speaker, to get this work done. And most of all, I want to thank the people who have been affected, the people of the Grenadines, the vulnerable people throughout the island of St. Vincent, who have had tremendous forbearance as they understand that everything can be done immediately, but that the government has been doing its level best within its resources to deliver relief to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we will continue. We've made some pledges in our budget speech about rebuilding houses, about making people whole, about helping them with income support, about helping farmers retool and build their production, about rebuilding better and in a more resilient fashion than existed before, and we intend to keep each and every one of those promises to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
The Department of Labor hosted a public awareness event at the Ministerial Building car park today in commemoration of May Day, also known as Workers' Day. The event aimed to provide awareness on critical labor laws and promote the rights and responsibilities of employees and employers across various sectors. Susan Clark, Deputy Labor Commissioner, emphasized the importance of the outreach initiatives, highlighting that they serve as a valuable platform for workers to become informed about their legal rights and obligations in the workplace.
All of this is to celebrate workers. We all know tomorrow is May Day, and so we thought that we would bring the office outside to do just that today. So the importance of workers knowing what their rights are is that it allows them to know what their responsibility is as an employee, and it is important to know for them what their rights are as an employee, so that in the workplace they know exactly how many hours they're supposed to work, they know how much vacation they're entitled to, they know how much sick leave they're entitled to, and they know even if they are terminated unfairly, they know that they can come to the Department of Labor. We have what we call a hearing officer who would do a hearing if they feel that they've been terminated unfairly, and so they can come to the department to be part of that process. So in a nutshell, it is important for all employees to know what their rights are as an employee, like I said, because things happen in the workplace and we want to ensure that they know that they can come to the Department of Labor to seek their justice. Okay, so just as how we would have explained the importance of having the employees know what their rights are, so too we would like the employers to know what their rights are, so that they can have a balance in the employment relationship. In 2024, the Wages Council would have produce what we call the wages regulations for the different sectors, and so we implore employers to get these wages regulations so that they can ensure that workers are being treated fairly, that they are paying workers the correct wages, that they are giving them the correct holidays, the correct sick leave. We've now added paternity leave as well as compassionate leave, and so it is important for employers to know what they are guided by in order to do the right thing.
The Department of Labour also partnered with the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force Anti-Trafficking in Persons Unit to highlight the issue of human trafficking. Detective Shannon Joseph represented at the session.
My name is Shannon Joseph, a detective in the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Unit. So I'm here today partnering with the Labour Department to bring awareness about human trafficking and how it affects people in terms of the workforce. It is very important for persons to know some of the tactics that are used by these traffickers, so you won't be caught up in a situation or even be trafficked, right? So these traffickers, they are very patient. They would wait. They are methodological in terms of their planning, and due to the fact that it's an underground crime, it's under the radar. They do things precisely. So they would run fake ads, would use coercion, deception, fraud, all these kind of things to lure their victims in to be trafficked so they could gain financially. If you're suspicious of any activities surrounding human trafficking within St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you could contact us at 457-1211. Our office is based in Kittels, and you could ask for any of us at the unit, which is Corporal Dapwell, myself, and Superintendent Simmons.
According to the Labour Department, the inclusion of this component underscored its commitment to addressing broader social issues that intersect with labour rights, particularly the protection of vulnerable individuals. It says overall the event reaffirms the government's ongoing efforts to promote fair labour practices, foster safe working environments, and be versed on human trafficking through public education. Prime Minister Dr. Alf Gonsalves is expected to join other heads of government from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, in Washington, D.C. next week for a meeting with United States Secretary of the State, Marco Rubio. Speaking on radio today, Prime Minister Gonsalves said the meeting with the Secretary Rubio was arranged at his request and was accepted following Rubio's recent visit to several Caribbean nations. The discussions are expected to focus on regional cooperation, investments, and development matters. Dr. Gonsalves also announced that he will be traveling to London next week for a meeting with major investors regarding a potential investment opportunity for St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And immediately thereafter, next week, after I've been to Washington, I had to go to London. There is an investment which is looming, which I want to try and nail down with a big investor. And you know, I'm putting things in place for the next 5 years. Lots of things, Johnny P, for the next 5 years, so that the people would be able to see how the paradigm shift from a colonial and amended colonial economy to a modern, competitive, many-sided post-colonial economy, which is at once national, regional, and global. And I've outlined this and refined this thesis. It has been accepted in Parliament. Of course, the opposition could wiggle as much as they want, but they have no framework. you know, and I've written about it in some detail. So it's there. So that this investment, that would be very important. So I would leave next week, Monday, sometime in the afternoon, and then for Washington. The schedule is very hectic. I leave next week, and then I will return I leave on Monday and come back on Sunday to do those 2 gigs, as the cultural men and women would say, no? One in Washington and one in London.
Students of the Girls High School and the Thomas Saunders Secondary School currently housed in the temporary facilities at the decommissioned E.T. Joshua Airport will have to remain there for a while longer as rehabilitation work continues on their original school buildings in Kingstown. In Parliament on Monday, Opposition MP Dwight Fitzbramble posed questions regarding the status of the rehabilitation projects, what work is planned for this year, what the factors are causing the delays, and when the projects are expected to be completed. The questions were directed to the Minister of Transport and Works, Montgomery Daniel, who clarified that the projects fall under the School Improvement Program, which is being managed by the Ministry of Finance. Responding on behalf of the government, Minister of Finance Camilla Gonsalves explained that the original contract for the rehabilitation of the Girls High School included the extension of the Grimble Hall and the refurbishment of the Norma Keyser building. However, he said once work commenced, it was discovered that the proposed extension of the Grimble Hall was not feasible. The structure of 100 years old was found to be structurally unsound, with its masonry block unable to support the renovations. Additionally, most of the wooden interior elements were either rotten or severely damaged. As a result, Minister Gonsalves said a decision was made to redesign a more functional building to better serve the needs of both students and staff. In the meantime, the contractor successfully completed the refurbishment of the Norma Keyser building, but work on the Grimble Hall was put on hold as it could not have been extended.
Well, first of all, then we had to do consultations with stakeholders, and there were some stakeholders with an interest in historical buildings that were unwilling to concede that Grimble Hall needed to be demolished and rebuilt, and there was some back and forth with various stakeholders. And in fact, the impasse was only broken when the teachers themselves wrote the government and said that they were very keen to have Grimble Hall demolished, not only because they considered the current state of the building unsafe, but because the building was no longer functional in terms of the proper flow and the necessary requisites of a modern educational facility. And it was only then that the impasse was broken. Then a redesign was done, but the designers, I must say, with no slight to any of the designers, got a little bit carried away and designed a building that was so elaborate. Beautiful as it was not something that the government could afford to build. And so then we had to remind them of their original brief, because they had exceeded the original brief in their creative zeal. And so that took a little bit of time as well.
Minister Gonsalves said construction on the redesigned Grimble Hall is now expected to begin this year. He said the architectural and engineering designs have already been finalized and the tendering process to select a contractor has been completed.
The project is currently awaiting the no objection from the Caribbean Development Bank to award the works contract as part of the procurement process. Once obtained, the approval of the Central Procurement Board will be sought, and the works are scheduled to commence promptly after a contract agreement is signed. The project is expected to last 12 months, with construction projected to begin in June of this year and completed by May of 2026. Madam Speaker, in essence, we've tendered the process, we've tendered the contract out for the demolition of the existing Grimble Hall and the construction of the redesigned building, but we have to wait for the CDB to sign off on that tendering process, and then that process, and then we go to the tenders board, the procurement board, before we can award the contract. So it would be premature for me to say, without those approvals, who the contractor is. But that's where we are in the process, Madam Speaker.
In regards to the Thomas Saunders Secondary School, Minister Gonsalves noted that a pre-tender structural inspection revealed the existing building slated for rehabilitation was not structurally sound. As a result, the decision was taken to fully demolish the old section of the school and construct a redesigned facility in its place.
This triggered a comprehensive consultant selection process to develop a safer and more functional design for the school, as opposed to simply building back what was there before. And it incorporates enhanced and expanded facilities to better meet the needs of a modern student population. In 2025, demolition of the original building is scheduled to commence, followed by construction of the redesigned facility. The selected design consulting firm has experienced some internal challenges. If I wouldn't want to discuss those, but some of us who know some of the challenges that this particular firm has experienced with its unfortunate some tragedies related to personnel and the like. The final tender package is expected to be received from that entity this week, the first week of May. Sorry, by the end of the first week of May, between this week and by the end of the first week of May. Upon receipt of the final tender package, tender documents will be reviewed and approved by the relevant stakeholders. The procurement procedure for the contractor selection will then proceed, with construction expected to begin by September of 2025. The construction phase is projected to span 12 to 15 months, with an anticipated completion date of November of 2026, so that in the January term of 2027 essentially is when the students will be leaving the Arnersvale campus for Thomas Saunders and returning to the Kingstown campus.
Safety must always be the top priority when working with vulnerable children, says Kevin Glasgow, a hospital-based social worker. In an interview on WFM today, Glasgow emphasized that both social workers and medical professionals have a critical responsibility to remain vigilant in detecting signs of child abuse.
Children. As a medical social worker, we are often the front line in terms of when it comes to abuse coming through the hospital services. And we see different forms of abuse. And quite recently, I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I was saying, oftentimes we neglect that form of abuse called neglect. And that is a critical area too as well. Whether it is along the line of malnutrition, general personal hygiene, all of these things speak to harm. And so it is critical that we don't overlook and we don't downplay, neglect that form of abuse. But we see a variety of different things coming through the hospital. And many times we have to understand that it could be very subtle. So while a medical practitioner might be doing a review for maybe something that is respiratory or something that is a minor workup as it relates to maybe the child came in having some pain, or maybe it is not as serious as that, but in their overall review, it is part of their duty to pay attention to the body language, to how the child responds. So
Glasgow also highlighted the critical role of collaboration between social workers and healthcare providers in protecting children.
All right. So once any particular case comes to the hospital, sometimes the doctors might be the first point of contact, right? In terms of when they're reviewing, doing their assessment, they notice that something does not seem right. And so they would do further review. And if they're seeing that this might be a form of abuse, we are called immediately. And even if the doctor is not reviewing and the nurse or any practitioner is observant of anything that does not look right or gives the impression that there might be some form of abuse called in. And so we will do a review in terms of assessing the emotional state of the child. Generally social workers, we do baseline assessments. So we would do the initial workup in terms of emotions, the support system, and what we're seeing presented to us. But once that comes into the hospital, whether it's myself or a medical practitioner, once we see and there's clear evidence of abuse, it is automatically reported to the relevant authorities.
He further noted that steps must be taken to ensure that a child is not re-traumatized during the process of investigation and care.
And at the same time, we have to assess in terms of the safety of the child. Because if this child, we realize that the environment where it happened, or based on what the child is saying, the environment is the problem, then we have to immediately, whether we would keep out the hospital for a period of time until we have clearance from child protection in terms of their plan, but we would do our due diligence to protect this child even in that environment. But also, we would collaborate with psychology to provide the immediate emotional support that they might need at that time. Because safety is important, and sometimes you could see the anxiety, you could see different things manifesting within this child, and even their reluctance to share. We have to be mindful of that, because, as I said, we don't want to push too much, because the police would have to come and do their assessment, child protection would do their assessment, so several persons will be interfacing with the child. So we have to be mindful that what we are doing, we are not traumatizing the child with over questioning and trying to get whatever information. And a child, because a child is at a young age, if it's a young child, they might feel pressured to respond, and if you're not mindful, they might tell you what they think you want to hear. So we have to consider all those factors when we are reviewing or assessing a child.
Glasgow's comments came at a time when child welfare advocates across the region are calling for stronger safeguarding protocols in hospitals, schools, and community programs. According to recent regional data, child abuse, both reported and unreported, remains a significant concern in the Caribbean, prompting increased calls for training and accountability among professionals who interact with children. It also comes at a time when the nation is ramping up its child abuse awareness and prevention month under the theme "Children are our priority. Protect them so their future becomes a reality."